went back to the gold standard. Guys, I saw something really interesting happen in Zimbabwe the other day. In Zimbabwe, they've literally reintroduced gold as a national currency. So they made a coin out of gold. And this coin is worth about an ounce of gold, but it's shaped into a coin. It's got their little seal on it. It's got 2022 on it. It looks pretty cool, right? The central bank has released about 2,000 of these into Zimbabwe. And so they are pegging the price at right around $1,800. Now, whether price is going to stay there or it's going to fluctuate, that is yet to be seen. However, it seems to be related to the market price of gold. It may not stay at $1,800, but right at this moment, it's right around $1,800. Plus, they're charging some sort of 5% fee to facilitate this whole thing. This first batch, about 2,000 coins, were minted outside of Zimbabwe, but in the future, they're hoping to start minting these in Zimbabwe, which of course would be helpful for the country. Does this mean that they have returned to the gold standard, so to speak? I wouldn't say so. This doesn't mean that they've backed all of their currency by gold. They're just trying to combat inflation by introducing this as an additional currency. Basically, in Zimbabwe, their annual inflation rate is almost 200%. That's crazy. They've seen about a 200% inflation rate, and so to combat that, they're introducing this coin in hopes that it's going to slow down inflation. Could something like this happen in the United States? Well, technically, yes. We could start using gold coins as legal tender, but it's definitely going to take a process. Do I think that it's likely to happen? Probably not, but let's entertain the idea for a little bit. And let's say, besides gold coins, we actually just completely return to the gold standard. We left the gold standard a long time ago under President Nixon. Today, we're going to talk about what if we return to the gold standard? What would that do to the US economy? So let's just take a look. The price of gold right now is around $1,800. It's below $1,800, right? Maybe around $1,750 for an ounce of gold on the spot market. If we understand that an ounce of gold is worth about $1,750, let's think about how we could potentially peg the dollar or back the US dollar to gold. We trade with the US dollar all around the world. So a lot of trade and international trade depends on the US dollar and its ability to generally be able to hold value. If we were to move back to the gold standard, that means that we would have to peg the value of the US dollar to a certain price of gold. So $1,000 for 1 ounce of gold. So that means that $1 is worth 1/1000th of an ounce of gold. And that's all good and that's great. And we can transact using dollars instead of using little tiny pieces of gold. And so I can now pay with dollars because it's all backed by gold on the back end. It's a reasonable strategy. Is it likely to happen? Probably not, because a lot of the rest of the world would have to transition to a gold standard as well, because guess what? If we peg the US dollar to gold at $1,000 and then we realize that, hey, the United States is in debt. So if somebody else holds US dollars, they technically could come to the United States and be like, hey, I have like $10 billion and I'd like to exchange it for gold, please. The thing is that the United States does not have enough gold to back every US dollar in circulation. The only way that we could potentially solve something like that is by really hyperinflating the dollar, which means devaluing the currency. Global strategist Jim Rickards calculated that if we were to back every US dollar in circulation, the price for an ounce of gold would have to be about $10,000. That would allow this transition to potentially happen. Is it going to happen? Again, it's not very likely unless we really brought down the price of gold and we really devalued it, because otherwise we're devaluing the dollar. Right? And if we're devaluing the dollar, that means we're facing severe inflation. So not only Zimbabwe is facing severe inflation, we would be facing severe inflation at that point, and that would not be good for our economy or our currency. Another thing to consider in all of this is that gold is not exactly stable either. Gold can fluctuate in price as well. It's not just stuck at one price. It's not going to stay at $1,700 forever. It's not going to stay at $2,000 forever. It's not going to stay at $10,000 forever. So no matter what the exchange rate is between US dollars and gold, the value of that would still fluctuate. Gold actually has some pretty volatile movement. Gold fluctuates in price due to various different factors. And so these factors could affect our purchasing power. If you had maybe $1 million in the bank, or let's just say $100,000 in the bank, and gold dropped by 5%, well, you just lost $5,000 overnight. That allows your wealth and your finances to fluctuate a lot more than they do with just basic inflation if the dollar is not backed by anything. This also allows some pros to be present. The pros of this is that we can no longer print an infinite amount of US dollars. If we start backing every US dollar by gold, that really limits on how much we can actually print of the US dollar, which would help us with inflation. That allowed us to exit this Great Depression, this big recession that we were in, and it allowed us to rebuild our economy in a solid way. We had a solid foundation to work with, and then eventually once we left the gold standard, that really caused things to change. If we ever happen to see a return to a gold standard, it's probably going to happen globally. All the other countries are going to have to do it as well. Otherwise, we could bankrupt ourselves. If we wanted to potentially risk something like that, we would have to be able to honor these commitments, where if a country comes to us and they want to exchange their dollar for gold, we would have to be able to follow through on that. That means probably increasing our gold stockpiles by, I don't even know how much, maybe 10 times or 100 times what we have right now. If the United States decided to make a move like that, it would definitely be something that would have to be planned out meticulously and all the pros and cons considered. So we could help our currency in this way. However, that exposes us to a ton of risk. All of a sudden, we have this major change in the currency. And if we see a halt in global trade, that would also potentially hurt our economy as well, because we are such a global economy at this point. We trade with many countries around the world. It's definitely very, very complex. It doesn't even offer that much price stability at the end of the day, right? Gold still fluctuates in price. It changes a lot more than the US dollar visibly changes, right? On the spot market at least. And so that's another thing to consider. So just because it sounds good, it may not actually be all that great, and it's not very likely to happen. Some people thought that under President Trump, we may return to the gold standard. However, that did not happen. And most economists would agree that although it is a helpful thing and it was something that worked really well for us, the likelihood of it happening again is actually very, very low. I think what Zimbabwe is doing is really cool, introducing those gold coins, and I'd like to see how that's going to continue getting implemented in Zimbabwe and potentially other countries, and see how it impacts their economy and helps them hedge against inflation. All right, guys, hopefully you found this very informational. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.